The moment my daughter wrinkled her nose and told me my truck was embarrassing for Vicky, I knew something had to change. We were standing in my driveway, morning sun hitting the hood of my old Ford F-150. I'd just gotten back from fixing Mrs. Garsh's electrical outlet. Easy job, took me 20 minutes, but she insisted on paying me $50 and sending me home with leftover tamales. My name's Harold Peterson. I'm 68 and I've been an electrician for 45 years before I retired. These days, I do handyman work around the neighborhood because sitting around all day makes me feel useless. Been living in this house for 15 years now, bought it after my wife Linda died from cancer. Needed a fresh start for me and the kids. Patricia, my 32-year-old daughter, was standing there with her arms crossed, looking at my truck like it had personally offended her. Dad, seriously, she said, it smells like wire nuts and paint. Vicky shouldn't have to ride in that thing. Vicky is my 7-year-old granddaughter, Patricia's kid. Been living in my house for 8 months now, since Patricia's divorce went through. Temporarily, she said back then. That was 8 months ago. What's wrong with the smell of honest work? I asked, but Patricia just rolled her eyes. It's embarrassing, Dad. You need to get something more appropriate, like a minivan or something clean that doesn't scream handyman. I looked at my truck. Yeah, it smelled like work. Wire strippers, electrical tape, sometimes sawdust from helping neighbors with small projects. That truck had been with me for 12 years, never let me down once. Got it right after Linda passed, needed something reliable to haul tools and materials when I started taking on weekend jobs to keep busy. Nathan, my 30-year-old son, wandered out of the house at that moment. He's been living here even longer than Patricia came back after he lost his job at the bank 2 years ago. Still haven't seen him fill out a single application since then. Morning, Dad, Nathan mumbled, scratching his head. He was wearing the same sweatpants he'd had on yesterday. Your sister thinks I need a new vehicle, I told him. Nathan shrugged. Maybe something newer would be good. That's Nathan for you. Never takes a stand on anything. Just goes along with whatever Patricia says to keep the peace. Patricia pointed at my truck again. Dad, I'm not trying to be mean, but when I have to ask you to pick up Vicky from school, I don't want the other parents thinking we're what? She hesitated. Poor, that word hit me harder than I expected. Poor, like working with your hands for 45 years. Paying off this house 3 years ago, raising 2 kids alone after their mother died, and keeping food on the table somehow made you poor. I walked past them both and went inside. The kitchen still smelled like the coffee I'd made at 6 a.m. before heading out to Mrs. Garcia's place. The same kitchen where Linda used to make pancakes on Sunday mornings, where I'd taught both kids how to wire a light switch when they were teenagers. Patricia and Nathan followed me in. Dad, Patricia said, her voice softer now. I didn't mean it like that. I just think you deserve something nice. I poured myself another cup of coffee and leaned against the counter. The counter I'd installed myself when we first moved in here. Solid oak butcher block that had lasted through countless family dinners, homework sessions, and late-night conversations. How exactly am I supposed to afford something nice? Well, Patricia said, and I could hear something in her tone that made me pay attention. I've been thinking about that. Nathan sat down at the kitchen table and started scrolling through his phone. This was clearly Patricia's show. I have this opportunity, she continued, to open a daycare. There's this perfect space downtown and I already have 3 families interested. I nodded slowly. That sounds good. You should do that. The thing is, I need startup money for licensing, equipment, insurance, all that stuff. Here it comes, I thought. How much? Well, the bank says if you put the house up as collateral, I could get a loan for $75,000. I set my coffee cup down carefully on the counter Linda and I had picked out together 15 years ago. You want me to mortgage my house? It's not really a mortgage, Dad. It's more like a business loan with the house as backup, and I'd pay it back once the daycare gets going. I looked around the kitchen. This house had been mine for 15 years. Bought it after Patricia's mother died, wanted a fresh start for all of us. Worked every weekend for 12 years to pay it off early, took on electrical jobs for half the city, saved every penny I could. Patricia, I said slowly, when's the last time you had a job? Her face flushed red. I've been looking, Dad. It's hard with Vicky and everything. When's the last time you had an interview? I have one next week. Nathan looked up from his phone. Didn't you say that last week too? Patricia shot him a look that could melt steel. I'm being selective. Okay, I need something that works with Vicky's schedule. I walked to the window and looked out at my truck. Mrs. Garcia's tamales were still sitting on the passenger seat, wrapped in foil. That woman was 78 years old and still insisted on paying me full price, even though I told her neighbor rates should be lower. She'd lived through her husband's death, raised 4 kids on a seamstress salary, and never once asked anyone to bail her out of her problems. Dad? Patricia said behind me, what do you think? What I thought was that I'd been supporting 2 grown adults for months now. What I thought was that neither of them had contributed a dime to groceries, utilities, or anything else since they'd moved in. What I thought was that Patricia was awfully quick to criticize my truck but never offered to help with gas money. But what I said was, let me think about it. Patricia's face lit up. Really? Dad, this could be amazing. I could finally be independent, while living in my house, eating my food, using my electricity, and asking me to risk my home for her business idea. I said I'd think about it. I repeated. That night, after Patricia had gone out with friends and Nathan was upstairs playing video games, I sat on my back porch with Vicky. She was coloring in one of those books with the princesses, tongue sticking out in concentration. The porch had been Linda's favorite spot in the evenings. She used to sit out here with her tea, watching the neighbors walk their dogs. Grandpa, Vicky said without looking up, Mom says you might buy a new car, maybe. Would you like that? She shrugged. I like your truck. It smells like you. Out of the mouths of babes. Linda would have laughed at that. She used to say my clothes smelled like copper wire and determination. Vicky, has your mom been going to job interviews? She looked up at me with those big brown eyes, same color as Linda's had been. She goes out a lot, but she always comes back with shopping bags. That got my attention. Shopping bags, yeah, new clothes and stuff. She said it's for interviews, but she has lots of interview clothes now. I made a mental note of that. If Patricia was unemployed and broke, where was the money for new clothes coming from? Vicky, do you like living here with Grandpa? She nodded enthusiastically. I love it. You make the best pancakes, and you fix everything when it breaks. That's what I'd done my whole life. Fixed things. Fixed electrical problems for half the city, fixed the leaky faucet in the upstairs bathroom, fixed Nathan's bike when he was 12, fixed Patricia's car when she was in college. Always fixing things for other people. What if Mommy and Uncle Nathan had to get their own house? Vicky frowned. Would I still see you? Of course I'm your grandpa. Nothing changes that. She went back to coloring, and I sat there thinking about Tamales and truck smells and what it means to be poor. The sun was setting behind the maple trees I'd planted when we first moved here. Linda had wanted something that would grow with us, she said. Those trees were taller than the house now. The next morning, I made a decision, but not the one Patricia was expecting. I called my lawyer, Eddie Martinez. Known him for 15 years, did the electrical work on his house when he was starting his practice. Good man, honest, never charged me full price when I needed legal advice after Linda died. Eddie, I said when he picked up, I need some advice about protecting myself from family. Harold, what's going on? I told him the whole story. The mortgage request, the unemployment situation, the general feeling that I was being taken advantage of. I told him about the shopping bags and the fake interviews, and how neither of my kids had contributed a penny to household expenses. Eddie listened without interrupting. When I finished, he said, Harold, what you're describing sounds like financial elder abuse. Come on, Eddie, it's not abuse. They're my kids. Financial abuse doesn't require strangers, Harold. Most of it happens within families. Adult children pressuring elderly parents into risky financial decisions. That's textbook stuff. I felt something cold settle in my stomach. What should I do? First, don't sign anything. Second, start documenting everything. Conversations, requests for money, evidence of their lifestyle versus their claimed financial situation. You mean like spying on my own kids? I mean like protecting yourself. Harold, if Patricia defaults on a $75,000 loan with your house as collateral, where are you going to live? That question stayed with me all day. Where would I live? I'd worked 45 years to own this place free and clear. Linda and I had dreamed about retirement here, about watching grandkids play in the backyard, about having family dinners around the table she'd picked out. I started paying attention to things I'd been ignoring, like how Patricia always seemed to have money for manicures and new clothes, but never for groceries. Like how Nathan ordered DoorDash 3 times a week, but claimed he couldn't afford to help with the electric bill. Like how they both acted like my house was their house. My refrigerator was their refrigerator. My retirement was their safety net. I also started carrying my phone in my shirt pocket with the voice recorder app ready. Eddie had been specific about that. Document everything. 3 days later, Patricia brought up the mortgage idea again. This time I was ready. Dad, she said over breakfast. I set up a meeting with the loan officer for Friday, just to talk through the options. I kept eating my eggs. The same eggs I'd bought and paid for, cooked on the stove I maintained. Served on plates Linda had picked out at a garage sale 20 years ago. Did you hear back from that job interview? Which one? The one you had last week. You said it went really well. Patricia stirred her coffee for a long time before answering. They're still making decisions. What company was it again? It's a marketing firm downtown. I nodded and pressed record on my phone app. What's the name of the firm? Why do you need to know? Just curious about where my daughter might be working. Patricia looked uncomfortable. It's called Creative Solutions. I made a note to look that up later. Something in her voice told me I wouldn't find any Creative Solutions marketing firm in our city. So about Friday, Patricia continued. The appointment is at 2 p.m. You should probably dress nice. What bank? First National. I knew First National, done electrical work there twice over the years. The loan officer was a guy named Gary who'd been there for 20 years. If Patricia thought she was going to charm her way through this, she had another think coming. Okay, I said, I'll be there. Patricia looked surprised. Really, Dad? That's great, but I'm bringing Eddie Martinez with me. The color drained from her face. Why do you need a lawyer? Because I'm old, not stupid. Any financial decision this big, I want legal advice. Nathan looked up from his cereal. Is that really necessary? Yes, I said firmly, it is. That afternoon, I did something I'd never done before. I followed Patricia, not proud of it, but Eddie had been clear about gathering evidence. She said she had an interview at 2 p.m. I wanted to see where she really went. She drove downtown. All right, but not to any office building. She went to the mall, spent 2 hours at the department stores, came out with 3 shopping bags. Then she met a friend for coffee at one of those expensive places that charges $6 for what used to cost 50 cents. I sat in my truck in the parking garage feeling like some kind of private investigator. This wasn't the man Linda had married. But then again, these weren't the kids Linda had raised either. When I got home, Patricia was already there, looking pleased with herself. How'd the interview go? I asked. Really well, she said without missing a beat. They said they'd call next week. What position was it for? Marketing coordinator. What kind of marketing do they do? She hesitated just long enough for me to know she was making it up. General marketing, advertising, social media, that kind of stuff. I nodded and went upstairs to my bedroom. The same bedroom Linda and I had shared for 12 years before the cancer took her. I sat on the edge of the bed and looked at the photo on my nightstand. Linda in her garden smiling dirt under her fingernails from planting tomatoes. What would you do, honey? I asked the photo. How did we go wrong with them? But I knew Linda would have said the same thing she always said when the kids were growing up. Love them enough to let them learn. The next few days, I paid closer attention to everything. Nathan spent most of his time playing video games or watching TV. When I suggested he help with yard work, he said his back was bothering him. When I mentioned the neighbor needed help moving furniture, he suddenly had plans with friends. Patricia was more subtle, but not by much. She'd disappear for hours, claiming job interviews or errands. But she always came back with purchases, new makeup, a purse, shoes. When I asked about it, she said she was using her emergency credit card for interview clothes. How are you planning to pay that off? I asked. When I get a job, obviously, and if the daycare doesn't work out. She looked at me like I'd asked if the sun might not come up tomorrow. It'll work out, Dad. You just have to have faith. Faith? I'd had faith in a lot of things over the years. Faith that hard work pays off, faith that treating people right matters. Faith that family looks out for each other. Some of that faith was looking pretty shaky these days. Friday came faster than I expected. I put on my best shirt and tie, the ones I usually saved for funerals and graduations. Eddie met me at the bank carrying a briefcase that probably cost more than my truck. You ready for this? He asked. Ready as I'll ever be. Patricia was waiting in the lobby, dressed in a sharp business suit I'd never seen before. Probably one of those interview outfits Vicky had mentioned. Nathan was with her, looking uncomfortable in khakis and a button-down shirt. Gary, the loan officer, was the same as I remembered, friendly, professional, but sharp as a tack when it came to money. His office had pictures of his kids on the desk and a certificate on the wall from the local Chamber of Commerce. So Gary said, once we were all seated, I understand you're interested in a business loan with property collateral. That's right, Patricia said before I could speak. My father owns his home outright and I need startup capital for a daycare business. Gary nodded and looked at me. Mr. Peterson, you're comfortable with putting your home at risk for this venture? That's what I wanted to discuss, I said. Eddie, would you mind sharing what we talked about? Eddie opened his briefcase and pulled out a folder thick with papers. Mr. Peterson came to me with concerns about this arrangement. We've done some research on the business plan and the applicant's employment history. Patricia's face went pale. What kind of research? Eddie consulted his notes. For instance, Ms. Peterson claimed to have had a job interview with Creative Solutions Marketing. There is no such company registered in this city. Gary's eyebrows went up. Is that accurate, Ms. Peterson? Patricia opened her mouth, closed it, then tried again. There might have been some confusion about the name. What about the interview you had this week with the hotel downtown? I asked. How did that go? Patricia stared at me like I'd grown a second head. She'd never mentioned any hotel interview. I'd made it up. That's still pending, she said weakly. Eddie pulled out another sheet of paper. We also looked into Ms. Peterson's spending patterns over the last 6 months. Credit card records show purchases at high-end retailers totaling over $3,000, while claiming to be unemployed and unable to contribute to household expenses. Gary was taking notes now. This was not going the way Patricia had planned. Nathan was slouching in his chair like he wanted to disappear through the floor. Furthermore, Eddie continued, Mr. Peterson has been supporting 2 adult children and 1 grandchild with no financial contribution from either adult. This creates a pattern of financial dependency that would make loan repayment unlikely. Patricia finally found her voice. Dad, I can't believe you're doing this to me. I'm not doing anything to you. I said, I'm protecting myself. Gary cleared his throat. Ms. Peterson, based on what I'm hearing, I don't think we can approve this loan. The risk factors are too high, and there appear to be discrepancies in the information provided. Patricia stood up so fast her chair squeaked. This is unbelievable. Dad, you're destroying my future? No, I said calmly. I'm protecting mine. She stormed out of the bank. Nathan followed her like a confused puppy, but not before giving me a look that was half disappointed, half relieved. Gary shook his head. Harold, I've seen this before. Adult kids trying to get their hands on their parents' assets. You did the right thing. Eddie packed up his papers. The next step is establishing some legal boundaries. We should talk about grandparent rights, tenant agreements, and asset protection. Tenant agreements. Your house, your rules. If they want to live there, they need to contribute, otherwise they need to leave. That evening, I came home to find Patricia and Nathan sitting at the kitchen table looking like someone had died. The same table where Linda used to help them with homework, where we'd celebrated birthdays and graduations, where I'd told them their mother wasn't coming home from the hospital. So I said, how was your day? Patricia looked up at me with red eyes. How could you embarrass me like that? I didn't embarrass you. You embarrassed yourself. Nathan spoke up. Dad, we need to talk. I sat down across from them. The late afternoon sun was coming through the kitchen window, hitting the spot where Linda used to sit when she was peeling potatoes or snapping green beans. Go ahead. This whole thing with the lawyer and the bank, Nathan said, it feels like you don't trust us. Should I trust you? Patricia wiped her eyes. We're your children. Yes, you are. And you're also adults who've been living in my house for months without contributing anything. We help out, Patricia protested. When do you help out? Silence. The kind of silence that fills up a room and makes everyone uncomfortable. Here's what's going to happen, I said. Both of you have 30 days to get jobs and start paying rent, or you need to find somewhere else to live. Nathan blinked. You're kicking us out? I'm giving you a choice. Contribute or leave. Patricia slammed her hand on the table. What about Vicky? What about her? You'd really throw your granddaughter out on the street? I looked at her carefully. Vicky is welcome here anytime. You and Nathan are welcome here, if you want to be responsible adults. Patricia started crying again. This isn't fair. Fair. I stood up and walked to the window. My truck was sitting in the driveway where it belonged, faithful as an old dog. You want to know what's not fair? Working for 45 years, losing your wife to cancer, raising 2 kids alone, and then having those kids treat you like a free hotel. I turned back to them. You have 30 days. The next few weeks were uncomfortable. Patricia barely spoke to me, spending most of her time on her phone or out of the house. But something interesting happened. Within a week, she had found a job at a local preschool. Turns out when you actually need money, finding work becomes a priority. Nathan took a little longer, but he eventually got hired at a warehouse. Night shift, but it paid $18 an hour with benefits. More than he'd made at the bank, actually. They both grumbled about the $400 each I was charging for rent, but they paid it. The first time I held those 2 checks in my hand, I felt something I hadn't felt in months: respect. The house started feeling different. Not just because they were contributing, but because the dynamic had changed. When Nathan wanted to order pizza, he asked if I wanted anything instead of just ordering for himself. When Patricia needed someone to watch Vicky, she asked politely instead of assuming I'd be available. One evening, about a month later, I was sitting on the back porch with Vicky again. She was working on a new coloring book, something with horses this time. Grandpa, she said, Mommy got a job. I know. How do you feel about that? Good, she's happier now. She was sad a lot before. Kids see more than we give them credit for. Are you happy living here? Yes. But Mommy says we might get our own house soon. Would you like that? She thought about it seriously, maybe. But I'd miss you. You know what? Even if you move to your own house, you can still visit Grandpa anytime you want. Promise? Promise? That weekend, Patricia approached me with something I hadn't seen in months. An apology. Dad, she said, I want you to know that I understand now. What you did at the bank, making us get jobs, charging us rent. I was angry at first, but I get it now. I was replacing a light fixture in the hallway, something I'd been putting off for weeks. Get what? That you were trying to help us in your own way. I tightened the last screw and flipped the switch. Light flooded the hallway. How do you figure? Because for the first time in 2 years, I feel like I can take care of myself. And Vicky, that was worth more than any apology. 3 months later, Patricia and Vicky moved into a small apartment about 10 minutes away. Not because I kicked them out, but because Patricia wanted her independence. Nathan stayed a little longer, saving money for his own place. My truck still smells like work. Yesterday, I helped old Mr. Johnson rewire his garage, and afterwards Vicky rode with me to pick up supplies at the hardware store. She told me she likes how my truck smells like fixing things. Some folks might think I was too hard on my kids, but sometimes being a good parent means not making life too easy. Sometimes love looks like boundaries. Linda would have been proud. We raised them to be independent, even if they forgot that for a while. Sometimes the best thing you can do for family is teach them to stand on their own 2 feet, and sometimes the smell of honest work is the sweetest thing in the world. My truck and I learned that respect isn't something you inherit. It's something you earn every single day through the choices you make and the boundaries you keep. Sometimes the greatest gift you can give your children isn't comfort, it's the confidence that comes from knowing they can survive without you.